Shakur Stevenson stops Jamel Herring in the 10th round to become WBO Super Featherweight champion. Let's talk about it. This fight was very one-sided. I think it's fair to say that Shakur Stevenson put an absolute shellacking on Jamel Herring, something that I don't think many people expected. Personally, I didn't do a pre-fight video on this or a prediction, but in Hatman's Discord, I was talking to Pound for Pound Boxing, shout out to you, bro, and I felt that Shakur Stevenson would win a close fight, probably a majority decision, I said. But let's talk about it. I'm not going to break it down round by round because there really isn't that much to talk about. In the first round, both guys came out throwing jabs at each other. It was very much a battle of the jabs. Shakur Stevenson looked the more assertive. He was quite relaxed and steady in his movements. By the second round, I know I said I wasn't going to do a round by round breakdown, but this is pretty much it. Herring looked quite jittery after the first and the second round, and I think it was the sharpness of Shakur Stevenson, very sharp on the counters to both head and body, and it made Herring very gun shy. Herring understands, being an experienced fighter, that he can't afford to be gun shy, so he was attempting to jab here and there, but he did not look confident at all. And so the first round was really, there was nothing too meaningful. I still gave it to Shakur, and pretty much every round went to Shakur Stevenson. I think that Andre Ward, his unofficial scorecard, he had Stevenson sweeping the rounds, and I can't imagine anyone would try and disagree with that, because pretty much from the second round on, that's when the beating started, and Shakur Stevenson was just landing and tagging Herring at will, pretty much. And Shakur Stevenson, he really didn't have to do that much in this fight. He wasn't really put under pressure by Herring, who was quite considerably bigger. He just went through the motions, and Herring was there in front of him for the majority of the fight. Wasn't really able to offer much in terms of offense, but he wasn't able to defend himself that effectively either. The creativity, the accuracy, and the skill of Shakur Stevenson was just too much. There were some moments in the later rounds where Herring had a slight bit of success on the inside. I think it was kind of threw caution to the wind when he got into range, and he managed to land some shots on Shakur Stevenson, some decent body shots, uppercuts and hooks. But Stevenson, as well as being able to command the distance at long range, he was also able to tie up Herring somewhat effectively, given the fact that Herring is, as I say, quite a bit bigger than Stevenson. And it was really quite strange because, of course, Stevenson he's a young guy. He's 24 years old, but he looks even younger. Whereas Jamel Herring is about 35 years old, I believe. So it is quite literally a youngster, a young man versus a fully grown man. But it was Stevenson who was very much the boss in this fight from start to finish, and he didn't let up. And so, as I say, from round 2 onwards, it was pretty much a beating. Herring was never out of it. I don't think Shakur Stevenson is the biggest one-punch knockout artist. His power has been kind of point of some criticism, and I think that's fair enough. We'll touch on that in a bit as well. Herring was never out of it. He was always cognizant. He was always in the fight, in terms of he was never out of it. But he just could not do anything about the offense. He just couldn't defend himself effectively, and the fight was stopped in the 10th round. Some people saying it's not the greatest stoppage. I tend to agree. I believe that the referee could have at least let Herring see out the round, but he was having virtually no success in the grand scheme of things. When you look at the fight overall, virtually no punches landed, nothing that made you think that he could claw his way back into the fight. There was nothing like that. Shakur Stevenson was very much in the driving seat, doing what he wanted, landing at will, piecing Jamel Herring up, and really left nothing down to chance, and it was a good performance. I was having a conversation with Pound for Pound Boxing, as I say, in Hatman's Boxing Discord, and he asked me if I thought that Shakur Stevenson could hurt Herring, and I felt potentially. And it's because Stevenson isn't the biggest puncher, but when you look at the positioning and the biomechanics of Jamel Herring, it leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion, because he does this thing that I see quite a lot. And if you watch the fight, or if you watch Herring's fights, you'll see it as well, where he slips to the front foot, but he leaves his hands behind. He kind of, when he goes into that front foot position, his right glove and his left glove are behind the line of his head. So he has virtually no defense when he's moving to that position. And then it's biomechanically poor, and it's also technically and tactically poor as well. And a lot of people, they downplay the importance of biomechanic and technique in boxing. But remember, boxing, yes, once again, it's the art form and it's the science. But if I tell you, run or sprint 100 meters as fast as you can while not using your arms, keep your arms dead straight and you only use your legs, there's no way you're going to get the same time as if you're sprinting normally. It's because of the biomechanical factors. Your body is designed to move a certain way, following certain principles, and that applies to any activity you're doing. There's always going to be a biomechanically optimal position. It will vary slightly depending on your individual anthropometrics, your body measurements, but you have to have an understanding of the biomechanics of the sport you are competing in. And it doesn't seem like much, but when you consider that, Herring it's a position that he goes into and he can't work anything off it. He has no effective offense, no effective defense. And it's kind of difficult for me to explain it with just audio, but check out the fight and see when he does that slip to the front foot. It's very, very poor stuff. It's also very common in boxing. So hopefully we can change that if we grow this channel big enough. But also another point I made is that I believe that Shakur Stevenson, he has a lot of success against other southpaws, and this is actually quite common. And it's, of course, southpaws are somewhat rare. They're relatively rare compared to orthodox fighters. And so a lot of orthodox fighters, they're uncomfortable fighting southpaws. But that is still also the case for other southpaw fighters as well. Whereas Shakur Stevenson, he is a very accomplished amateur, spent a lot of time sparring in a lot of different gyms, and he's probably had a lot of southpaw fights against southpaw opponents, as well as sparring. And you could tell the difference, and I think that played a pivotal part in this fight, is that Herring just isn't that good against southpaws. He's a southpaw himself, and he doesn't do well against other lefties. And this is kind of reflected in the fact that if you look at his two previous losses to, I think it's Shafikov and Memphis Miller, they're both southpaws. And so I think it's definitely a kryptonite of Herring. And so it was, at the end of the day, Shakur Stevenson was just the better fighter. He was superior in pretty much every aspect. But I think those are kind of the two parts that maybe played the biggest factor, were Herring's poor technique and his lack of proficiency fighting against southpaws. Also, I think there is a degree where, look, don't get me wrong, Herring's a good fighter. You don't become a world champion without being at least half decent. And it was weird because Herring was someone for many years who I always heard his name, but I'd never seen him fight. And this was kind of around 2015, 2016, I want to say, always hearing this guy's name. And yeah, he's a decent fighter, but I think of late the Carl Frampton win, which was a good win, I think it flattered him a little bit and kind of made him out to be a little bit of a super featherweight monster, when that's not really the case. Taking out Carl Frampton, who was a good fighter in his day, he was decent, but he's built like a garden gnome and was getting hurt by the likes of Josh Warrington. It's not a top tier win. It's a good win in in devastating fashion because he stopped Carl Frampton. It was a good stoppage, but yeah, maybe not the monster that people thought he was. And so anyway, it's onwards and upwards for Stevenson. It'll be interesting to see where he goes next. He is now a 2-weight world champion. Hopefully he defends this belt, because I don't think he defended his belt when he was at featherweight. So hopefully he can maybe even unify this division. That's something we always like to see. I think he called out Oscar Valdez immediately, someone who has been in very hot water recently, and I think a lot of people would probably be backing Stevenson to beat Valdez. So it's interesting the way ahead. Stevenson's a young guy, and I think he's still got a lot to learn, but he's very, very much on the way to becoming something special. And just as a little kind of side note to close out this video, you guys have probably seen it yourselves, but there's this video of Shakur Stevenson sparring Devin Haney at the Mayweather gym. I think it's a few years old. I think maybe 2015, 2016, around that kind of time. That's when it came out, probably in the lead up to the Rio Olympics when Stevenson was going to go. And I remember looking at these two and I'm thinking, I just felt, I was just more impressed by Stevenson. Just his poise, his technique, the way he moves in the ring. You could kind of tell there was a bit more intelligence behind his work. And I think we're starting to see that now. Obviously, that was my opinion back then. I don't know about you guys, but I see a lot more quality when it comes to Stevenson. He's not perfect by any means. No fighter is. But I watch him and I watch Haney, and I'm still more impressed by Shakur Stevenson. So I'm definitely excited to see where he goes next. And so that's all from me regarding this fight. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. Do you think Stevenson had a good performance, a bad performance? Do you think he can do better? What would you like to see him improve on, if anything? And what would you like to see him do next? So yeah, leave that in the comment section. I'll get back to you. If you could like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff as always. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.